We got Kevin Durso joining us from 97.3 ESPN.com as we got to get into what actually happened at the deadline because the Flyers did make multiple deals, Kevin. So, first of all, thanks for joining us today. How's it going?
Going well, Josh. How are you doing?
Doing pretty good. So, I want to start here because, and honestly, I was so tired and delirious last night, I would have grabbed the audio, but I know you heard the same presser from Briere that I did.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought the comment, I wanted to start with the Ristolainen comment, where he basically painted it as the media was trying to get Ristolainen traded. The Flyers were not trying to do it. And then, he started making some very interesting side comments about, the history of Ristolainen and the Flyers. And, I wanted to get your one start there, Kevin, because, you're someone who's covered this team for a decade. You know the different general managers that have been here. I don't remember a time where Hextall or Fletcher ever overtly called out the media for a situation like the Ristolainen thing, because I don't think it was crazy to think he could be traded, but Briere made it sound like, it was basically the media's fault that he was getting phone calls.
Yeah, I thought that was a little off base on Briere's part. It wasn't like a fabricated thing that the media was pushing that he had to be sold. There was potential good value there because other defensemen of similar style, of similar size were getting traded. And that's, we read the situation as media members. We look at all of the information that we have available. And that's kind of why, I see Tyler Myers go to Dallas. I see the two defensemen that go from Winnipeg to Buffalo. I see trades like that happen. Connor Murphy went to Edmonton. They're all very similar. And you saw the packages in return. And that's why I had put out earlier in the week, I think the floor here was a second round pick, probably, if you're reading the tea leaves of everything that's going on, of what these return packages are looking like. It was no secret that Briere was looking for a first round pick. And I understand if Briere's taking a step back and going, I wasn't going to sell low. I wasn't going to let other GMs out there lowball me on this. So I wasn't trying to trade him, but it doesn't mean that he wasn't available. It doesn't mean that you weren't taking calls. And that was not a media fabricated thing. So that's where I thought it was a little off base to make it seem like we were saying, oh, he had to sell him. Nobody said he had to do it. We all just kind of figured by reading all the information we had that the value was probably the highest it was going to be. And that's where it felt like a trade, I don't want to say was imminent, but certainly seemed likely earlier this week, and then obviously never came to fruition.
I mean, I'll admit it. When I saw the Flyers trade Bobby Brink for a guy who physically is a Ristolainen replica, right?
Mm-hmm.
You see, for those who don't know, David Jiricek, who's a former first-round pick, he is almost, I think it's the same exact height as Ristolainen. He's almost the same exact size and everything.
It's very close. And and I'm with you. I first of all, I'll tell you this. To kind of go over and I know we'll get into the whole scope of the day in general, but that was the first move that was made. And to start the day with, if I'm just looking at that trade by itself in a vacuum, I would have given that a solid B grade for two reasons. One, the prospect is 22 years old. I know he's been on 3 teams now, but clearly there's been some roadblocks for him to get into the NHL. And if there's an opening, I know you and I, Josh, have talked about the defense a lot. So here's a young player who you can, and I read it the same way Briere did from the press conference. It's a little bit like the Jamie Drysdale situation. You bring in a player. Drysdale was 21 when they got him. Now 2-3 years later, he's probably the second best defenseman on the team, and he's really grown over those 2-3 years. So you're trying to do the same thing, and he plays on the right side, and he's got a big shot, and he's big and physical. He's very, like that, like you said, that Ristolainen kind of replica in a way. So I have no problem with those type of deals. You did it with Drysdale. Theoretically, you did it with Zegras, trying to revitalize him, and you could do the same thing with Jiricek and see if you can't make that work as well and get a nice piece on the younger side. So in a and the other piece of the trade was by moving Bobby Brink out where you had an abundance of wingers, you did two things. You opened up a roster spot, which today is going to Alex Bump, who's a prospect you've been waiting to kind of see at the NHL level, and you opened up more specifically a spot on the right wing, which leaves you with really no excuses to put Matvei Michkov on a side that he has publicly said he prefers to play. So that was why I would have graded that very solidly. You not only took care of a position of potential need and got a younger player that you could try to develop, but you also opened up spots for another player who's developing to get a shot at the NHL level and to move arguably your top prospect to the side that he actually prefers. So all of it played in favor, but then it seemed like it was setting the stage for a lot more than what followed. That's, I think, what's disappointing.
Yeah, and I would just say Kevin Durso, our Flyers insider from 97.3 ESPN.com, at Kevin_Durso on the X platform, joining us. Josh Hennig, Mike Carlin, broadcasted live from Tropicana Showroom in Atlantic City, presented by Boxing Insider Promotions. Kevin, when you think about also, you just mentioned about the young prospect coming up, okay? Not Alex Berardis, right, back in the studio, who's our
Correct.
producer today. No, it's Alex Bump, and it's like, who is he? For those who don't know, because I think that's an important part of this conversation. That is, Briere has talked about in the past, and he actually called out. I don't know who the media member who asked the question, but he actually called them out yesterday, where he said, "You always ask me about these young players getting opportunity to come up. Well, I have created now, trading Bobby Brink, an opportunity to bring a young prospect next to talk about who this young prospect is and why it should matter to Flyers fans."
Sure. I mean, well, first of all, as a college player, he was a really solid college player at Western Michigan and helped them win a national championship. And it seemed like last season, after they won the national championship, that it seemed like he was going to not only he was definitely going to sign, and the question was, would they give him a shot at the very tail end of last season to get a chance at the NHL level? And prospects like that always kind of, their mind can sometimes go one way or another. A lot of times it goes the one direction, which is, I just want to play immediately. Sure, give me a shot at the NHL level. But when you do that at the end of the season, the Flyers are going to face this probably with Porter Martone if time allows at the end of the season. If you know for sure that you're not a playoff team, and the Flyers weren't last year at this time, and this year it probably will be the same way, do you want to burn a year of an entry-level contract on one game just to give them the experience? Or do you want to say, it's better if we hold off on this for the year, you go to the AHL, you get the professional experience, but we start the contract clock next year? And they didn't do it with Bump. And actually, that was Bump saying, I'd rather go into the playoffs in the AHL than go to the NHL for one game, and I'll wait my turn. And then, unfortunately, he didn't quite have the standout training camp that people thought he would have, so he didn't start the season in the NHL. He's had some injury trouble in the minors this year that's delayed this. So it took until after the trade deadline and over 60 games into the NHL season for this to finally happen. But here it is, and this is going to be the opportunity for Bump to prove that he belongs in the NHL and gets to stick. He had, like I said, he had a really good college years. If you're a point-per-game player in college, you're usually pretty good, because it's unlike juniors, where juniors, there's an age top out. You play with teenagers primarily. When you come into college and you play starting at 18, 19 years old with 21 and 22-year-olds, there's a higher bar that's set for the physicality of it. And Bump, by the time he was only a sophomore at that time, 42 games, 23 goals, 47 points. That'll get people's attention. And he's not necessarily a highly touted prospect in terms of draft position. He wasn't taken high in the draft by any stretch, but he's made a name for himself as he's been brought up. So now he gets the chance to see if he can do it at the NHL level.
Now, with the trade of Brink, the other thing, part of the conversation is, you heard some of the players in the locker room, like Konechny, say, they're going to miss him. They had a good relationship with him. But I do want to emphasize the fact that this was a restricted free agent. This is a guy who's from Minnesota. So the Flyers were not just trading a guy for a defenseman. The Flyers were trading a guy who there was no guarantee he was coming back, right?
Not necessarily. When you're a restricted free agent, it's kind of like saying you still have club control. So the Flyers really had the control there. I mean, the only way that they may not have been able to bring him back is if somebody really wanted to take the chance and offer sheet him. And I mean, we talked about offer sheets last offseason, thinking that there's big names out there, top 5 draft picks that may not have a contract when free agency rolls around. Somebody might take the chance and try to force a team's hand to overpay them or whatever it may be, and nobody does it. So the chances that somebody was going to swoop in and take him from you on an offer sheet was probably next to nothing. So they really weren't at risk of losing him. The key with him being a restricted free agent is exactly that you have that control, that he's probably on the cheaper end of a contract. So you don't necessarily have to pour a lot of money or assets into maintaining that and keeping him for a long-term future. Like it's the same situation that Trevor Zegras is in. He's a restricted free agent at the end of this year too. And Anaheim could have said, we can keep doing this, keep pushing it down the line, keep him, see if something turns the corner. But ultimately, when you start to get phased out of a situation, that's what happened with Zegras and Anaheim. And the same thing happened with Brink here, where too many wingers in the system lead to you're never going to really amount to much more than where you are now. And if you would like a better opportunity, or just, the Flyers also are going to have to give up some of those wingers to get the other positions of need. That's why you do it for a defenseman like David Juracek, and you give yourself a chance to bolster that area while giving up something from an area where you've got other guys coming. Bump's been waiting in the wings, and Porter Martone's not far away. I mean, Martone is having a killer year as a freshman in college, so he's close, and you needed to start opening up some spots, and that's what they did with that trade.
Kevin, it's Michael. Quick question. I'm the first one to know the people that listen to this. I'm not a big hockey fan, so that has nothing to do with the Flyers. I'm just not a hockey fan. But I always love talking with people that are hockey fans. How do you see the crystal ball moving forward with the Flyers for this year? I'm not worrying about next year or anything like it, but how do you see it coming the next? What do we have? Like a third left of the season left?
Yeah.
With
the quarter,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, good. It's the quarter of the season left. Yeah.
How do you really see this season? Do they get to the point where, okay, we're not as good as we thought we are, let's start playing young guys, or are they still in it? Like, if I'm just turning on the Flyers for the first time, what do you think I'm going to see moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a tough question, only because once you hit this stage of the season, you kind of have to have that answer. And to me, they kind of still don't, to a degree. I mean, they didn't fully go seller mode and open the door for a bunch of prospects to come up and say, we're using the rest of the the final 21 games of the season to see what we've got. And they can treat it like they're still in the race, but you're still 6 points. Like, to me, this is the biggest problem. And if somebody didn't turn on, is turning on their first game today, let's say, instead of the last game they played, they were on a 3-game winning streak going into Thursday against Utah. Utah's pretty much, I mean, coming into that game, the point difference was 1, and I know they're in different conferences, so it doesn't line up, but Utah was 1 point better than the Flyers. You're on a 3-game winning streak. And I kind of really saw, based on everything, Josh, we talked like recent weeks about this. For a long time, your window of opportunity was kind of, well, it's got to be through the wild card and through Boston. That's really the only team you're going to catch if you want to try to make a playoff push. And they got to within 4 points. Boston, with the little break the Flyers had for a couple days, Boston won a game. They got it back to 6 points. But the key was that win for Boston was against Pittsburgh. And Pittsburgh's been without their captain, Sidney Crosby, for the last several games since the Olympic break. They're going to be still. He did practice yesterday, so that's a little bit of an interesting wrinkle. But also on Thursday night, while the Flyers were playing, Pittsburgh was playing Buffalo. They lose again. Boston lost to Nashville. Now, Buffalo's been really good, but Nashville's not a team you expect to beat Boston. So the gaps stayed the same. You had an opportunity to gain on both of those teams. You're playing Pittsburgh today, which would have been that's a 4-point game, realistically, where you could shift the whole narrative there. And, oh, by the way, while the Penguins were losing 5-1 to Buffalo, Evgeny Malkin decided to just, take a stick to the side of the head of Rasmus Dahlin. He's suspended for 5 games now. So now they're down 2 key players. So the window really was there. And if you would have won that game, I think there's a different message to this whole final stretch. I thought that losing 3-0 to Utah and playing one of your most lackluster energy games of the season told you all you needed to know about the direction this season was going. You're not going to get there. Not playing like that, not playing, not basically being able to look back and say, well, the goalie was really good, but everybody else not really with it. And truth be told, if you wanted to talk about being a playoff team and you're going into a deadline where selling is a possibility, even on, not maybe the greatest scale, like realistically, what did they really lose from the deadline yesterday, all things considered? Bobby Brink. Even Nick Delorier getting traded is not a huge loss to their lineup. So you had one player get traded, but you played the night before as if 5 players were getting traded, as if the roster was being blown up, and you played kind of with fear. The playoff teams that may still have to sell a piece wouldn't play that game thinking about, well, the deadline's coming and I don't know which of my buddies is getting traded and I'm worried about this and it's going to affect the way I play. You would have just been able to go out and handle your business. And it probably, if they would have won that game, then I would be talking about a little bit, maybe one last gas playoff push. You still theoretically can, because you can close the gap on Pittsburgh today, and Boston's got an interesting schedule going forward as well, and they didn't really do much at the deadline, but I would say that if you're turning on the Flyers for the first time today, you're just kind of getting it would be kind of, to me, it's an introduction to everything that's been wrong with the team for the last 10 years. That
Oh boy,
you're gonna see the stuck in the middle
great question
team.
then.
You're gonna see the stuck in the middle team that hasn't been able to kind of pick a side of which way they want to go. If they would have sold more yesterday, I would have said it's all about watching these young kids. Maybe they would have decided, like, if Ristolainen gets traded, maybe they would have decided, let's get Juracek up here right away. And then you're excited to see 2 new players that you didn't have who are prospects. Instead, you got 1, and that's something, but there's still a lot, it's still a lot of the same pieces, and people who have been watching or who checked out 5 years ago are going to come back and go, oh yeah, Sean Couturier's still here, and Travis Danheim's still here, and oh, they still have a goalie problem, and it's still all the same narratives.
He's Kevin Durso, our Flyers insider. 973ESPN.com is where you catch all of his Flyers coverage at Kevin_Durso on the X platform. And he joined us right here on Hanging with Hennig, broadcasting live Tropicana Stream in Atlantic City on 973 ESPN. Kevin, great stuff. By the way, 5:30 tonight, Flyers Penguins on our sister station, Rock 1041 and the Rock 1041 mobile app. Do not want to forget to have that pushed in there. Kevin, great stuff today. Appreciate you jumping on.
Absolutely, guys. Thanks.